Well, hello, welcome, and thank you all for waiting so patiently, and thank you all for tuning in and joining us for our second ever Oceanographic Roundtable discussion. It's great to see a nice audience join us online for this event. This is just the second in our new series of weekly Roundtable events, and a chance each week to join us at Oceanographic as we dissect and dive into some of the biggest headlines across the ocean news and ocean storytelling space. It's a pleasure today to be bringing a rather good news story to the forefront this week because, and as anyone here can likely attest, rarely do we get to spend much time in the good news stories when it comes to environmental matters. So imagine our delight when last week, not just one, but two major marine protected areas were announced by two separate governments many, many miles apart. And both of these developments mark a moment of significant progress for ocean protection. But equally, they give us cause to ask some important questions. Just this month, Chile signed to expand its protection of the ocean around the Juan Fernández and Nazca-Desventuradas marine parks, adding roughly 360,000 square kilometers of fully protected waters and bringing the total area under full protection in that region to nearly 1 million square kilometers, which makes it among the largest fully protected marine areas or marine ecosystems in the world. This move means that Chile now protects more than 50% of its exclusive economic zone from extractive activities like fishing and mining, aligning with global targets to conserve at least 30% of ocean waters by 2030. At the same time, and closer to home, Jersey's newly approved Marine Spatial Plan proposes designating around 23% of its territorial waters as marine protected areas, where mobile fishing gear, such as trawling and dredging, will now be prohibited, well, from September the 1st next year, from this year. And this is a major step for a small island state seeking to curb the environmental impact of certain fishing methods while balancing that socio-economic interest. Both these developments exemplify the ambition and the complexity of modern marine protection, which is large-scale, policy-driven conservation in a country with vast ocean territory like Chile, and spatial gear-specific protection in a densely used coastal sea like Jersey's. But it's also left us asking a few questions, namely, what lessons can other nations around the world learn from these developments as we collaboratively charge down that 30 by 30 goal? What makes a successful MPA in the first place? And how effective are they when it comes to benefiting not just wildlife, but human interest too? So I will be joined by three guest speakers, and they are this afternoon straddling a trifecta of perspectives, bringing their scientific, policy and community lenses to this conversation. And those experts are Francesca Trotman. Francesca Trotman is the Managing Director and founder of Love the Oceans, a UK registered marine conservation non-profit working in Mozambique to protect and study marine ecosystems through a holistic, science-based, community-led approach. She founded the organization in 2014 while completing her master's in marine biology, driven by her first-hand experience in witnessing unsustainable shark fishing and practices across Yangamo Bay. I'm going to need some help on pronouncing that one, Francesca, when you join us, and a lifelong passion for ocean life. She is also the author of a recent scientific paper on this very subject, intended as a roadmap for government in delivering effective MPAs. So, Francesca, if you'd like to join stage and say hello. Here she is.
Yes, it's Jangamo.
Jangamo.
But so good effort.
And our next guest speaker is Marina Mills, the director of the MSc Conservation Science and Practice Programme at Imperial College London, where she is also a senior lecturer in environmental policy and practice within the Centre for Environmental Policy. In her research and teaching, Marina focuses on applied biodiversity conservation with an emphasis on improving conservation policy and practice in ways that benefit both species persistence and human well-being. Her work spans terrestrial and marine systems and explores how conservation initiatives are adopted, spread, and sustained across different social and ecological contexts. Thank you so much, Marina, if you'd like to join us.
Hi.
Oh, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. And our third and final speaker will be Max Bello. Max Bello is a global marine protected area specialist at the Blue Marine Foundation and an internationally recognized ocean policy expert with nearly 3 decades of experience in advancing marine conservation and protection policy around the world. He has worked with with leaders where he has helped shape strategies for establishing large-scale marine protected areas and elevating ocean policy within governments and multilateral forums. Now, the last I heard from Max was he was just darting back from a talk that he gave in the Canary Islands to his hotel where he will be joining us. So hopefully he will be joining us very soon. If I say the magic words, Max, will you join us? Perhaps he's not there yet, but he will be online very, very shortly. Luckily, I've got a little bit longer to go with my introduction. So I am, by the way, Rob Hutchins, community editor here at Oceanographic. And my skin in the game is that I am the one here today with the questions. But I'm not alone. So the purpose of this kind of roundtable is to really offer you guys tuning in the chance to ask your questions and feel a part of the conversation too. So please do ask your questions throughout the next 30 minutes of conversation, and we will work to get those questions answered for you. Right, I feel like I've said far too much. So let's get into those questions and let's start with a word from each of you on those subjects. So Max hasn't quite turned up yet. So let's turn this over to yourself, Francesca. And let's just start with a question about MPAs in general and something based on your research and the recent research that you've just conducted about what evidence there is that really tells us how effective MPAs are at restoring marine ecosystems.
So effectiveness of an MPA, there's so many different factors that need to be measured. And there are some tools out there to help with that. So that's kind of what my paper was doing, was just pulling together a lot of different tools developed by a lot of different organizations, including Blue Marine Foundation, for instance, on different kind of elements of marine protected area implementation. Effectiveness is one of the factors that you've got to consider, and effectiveness is really, you're looking at whether the reason that you set up a marine protected area in the first place is being met. So usually the motivation for establishing a marine protected area is obviously to protect the marine area. It does what it says on the tin, or it's meant to. But then you've got to measure that effectiveness through ecological monitoring. You've got to measure that effectiveness through socioeconomic data. There's so many different metrics that you need to collect, and then you need to feed that back. So that's adaptive management. It basically means that you change and adjust and update based on what the measurements are and outputs are that you're receiving back about the effectiveness of your marine protected area. So there was a really good paper that was looking at something called paper parks, which some of the audience might be familiar with, but I'll just explain quickly what it is in case people aren't. But essentially a paper park is a protected area that is protected on paper, i.e. there's a law protecting it, but might not be protected in practice. So it can happen all over the world. And there was a great paper that talked about the paper park index, and it basically rated like lots of different parks based on their effectiveness. It was not a primary data collection exercise, so they weren't going into the field and collecting data themselves. They were just looking at reports from different areas and interviews and things like that. But it was a really good exercise in understanding how effective marine protected areas are. And that report had, I think it was over 30% or almost 30% were ineffective and were classified as paper parks in the paper park index. And it's really important, especially in this day and age, that we're not doing that, that we are, whilst there's this race to get 30 by 30 with the global targets, it's really important that we're doing it well. We're not just like, okay, we've got to do all of this as quick as we can and meet all these international targets so we can stand on stage at the next COP and go, yeah, we did it. It's really important that they are effective. And so proper planning and implementation, that's what it's all about. That's my take on it, at least. But I'm sure Marina probably has a different take or experience.
Marina, do you have a different take on that?
Well, no, not really a different take, but I think it's so important to just emphasize the idea that these marine protected areas need to be there. They don't need to be implemented. they need to be implemented and sustained in the long run, right? So for us to actually get the benefits that we want to see, there needs to be lots of management that happens within these areas, right? So I second this idea that it's not about racing to 30 by 30. It's about actually protecting things well, and also protecting things in a way that benefits people, benefits nature, and that can be sustained, right? Because that's where the benefits really lie, right? And also making sure that you're protecting like a range of habitats. It's not just about area, right? We're protecting for a specific purpose. So we really need to think about what ecosystems are being represented within our protected areas, as well as all the I guess the social and the ecological benefits that these protected areas will provide.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. You guys, you both raised two key points that I'm really keen to explore a bit more in depth in a couple of questions time. But just before we do, maybe we can just talk about some of the barriers that there are to actually enforcing these MPAs that effectively render them as paper parks, and how can they be realistically overcome?
Well, you go first.
Marina, do you want to go? You can go first. Okay. So, I mean, one of the biggest barriers is money, right? I think we all know this, working in conservation generally. Anyone who works in this kind of area of work, especially at the moment in the political climate, you've got so many different barriers, but financial is a big one. Enforcement is a big one. You've got political will. So whether, yes, we have the 30 by 30 targets, which has definitely increased political will to protect marine protected area and protect marine areas, and but what's the political will to actually make them effective versus just wanting to meet the target? And therefore within each country, because marine protected areas, a lot of people think the marine protected areas are synonymous with no take zones, and they think that a marine protected area means that zero activity can happen, and that's not the case. And so within each country, everyone has their different designations of marine protected area categories. And sometimes within a marine protected area as well, you'll have different zoning and things like that. So it does require quite a lot of planning and like buy-in from the government, community buy-in, government buy-in, all your stakeholders collaborating on it. So I think that having that kind of support is really important too. I think there's such a multitude of different barriers: education, outreach, communication. There's such a multitude of different barriers, but I would say that the kind of most obvious ones for sustainability often is financial, and then in terms of reaching effectiveness is enforcement and monitoring of it as well.
Yeah, oh, thanks for that answer. And Marina, anything you'd like to sort of add on to that or counter?
The community involvement, that's everything is about community involvement, right? Because it's marine protected areas are so vast, right? So if you don't have people enforcing themselves and wanting to abide by the rules, it's very hard to have an enforcement team that will manage to keep an eye in, like, in the whole ocean, and seeing how people are using the resources. It's a difficult system to enforce. So community involvement, I think, is a key thing to have these marine protected areas supported and sustained for a long time. And the community will be engaged if they see that these marine protected areas are benefiting them in some way. So I think that is, apart from money from the government, right, to actually sustain the management and providing the infrastructure that you need to manage, community support would be the key thing that I highlight.
Just to add on to what Marina's saying as well, sorry, I know I already spoke on this, but just a quick one. In terms of community involvement, what barriers communities face to be involved as well, like the kind of smaller barriers as well. Like for us, I work in Mozambique, I run an NGO here, and we work in marine protected area management. And one of the massive barriers that our communities face is not being able to swim. 98% of our community can't swim. And if you're going to manage a marine protected area, you need to be able to monitor it and if it's meeting its ecological goals. And that means usually in a marine area, swimming, diving, collecting that data like that. And so if you can't swim, then that can be a massive barrier to effective community-led marine protected areas. So also looking at it on kind of the small level as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually we were talking just before we came on stage in the green room about some of those other communities that have been effectively shut out of the development of MPAs, and it led to some really fascinating, I learned a lot actually when you were talking about the local communities of women that were shut out of some of these MPAs. I wonder if you could just talk us through those case studies and what we saw there, because it's crazy to me that there are pockets of communities that have been left out of the conversation. Oh, you're on mute again.
Yeah. I'll mention one paper that we recently did that Tanya O'Gara led, which was an impact assessment of the locally managed marine areas in Fiji. And locally managed marine areas is a community-led initiative. It's Indigenous-led, but it looks a bit like an MPA, right? It's the boundaries are the boundaries of the Indigenous territory, or Indigenous ocean, but within it there's different zones. Some areas are no take, some areas have different types of management, etc. And within that context, we found that when women were involved, the outcomes improved quite a lot. But there were power dynamics and just cultural barriers that impeded women from being involved, even if they were in the room. So I think it's also about making sure that everybody is part of the conversation and that everybody feels empowered to provide the feedback that they can provide and the insights that they can provide to improve the conversation.
Yeah, totally. And Francesca, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, obviously I work in East Africa, so my knowledge is fairly specific to the Western Indian Ocean. But just an example of this, in Kenya, for example, trading sex of fish has been something that has been done historically, that it's so common. There's a name for it, Chiboya. But basically what happened a little while ago is in one specific area of Kenya, monofilament net fishing was eliminated. And monofilament net fishing, for those that don't know, it's the shitty plastic nets that hurt your hands when you pull them apart, but they're basically see-through in the water column, and so everything that swims into it dies. It's super unselective and generally universally accepted as not a sustainable way of fishing. And so a law was passed eliminating these monofilament nets in this area, which obviously if you look at it from a purely conservation science side, people are like, wow, this is great, we're going to protect the marine environment, not as much bycatch, not as bycatch as accidentally caught fish, not as much accidentally caught fish, not as much accidentally caught rays, mantas, sharks, all these animals that are critically endangered. But they did not involve women in the consultation process. And what they didn't realize is that women, a lot of women in the community rely on what we call the shit fish. It's basically the small fish that are caught accidentally in the nets. So that's all your little reef fish and things like that. And they can be traded easily because it's just one whole fish. You just take the whole fish and you can trade them at market. And a lot of women were reliant on that for an income source. And the exclusion of them and the switch over from monofilament net fishing to more fishing like kayaks and more fishing that's targeted at pelagic animals. So that's generally your large animals like your barracudas and your tunas and things like that. Not as many of these small fish were available, if any, to be honest. And that meant that women were not in a position to be able to trade at a small level of these fish, and they had to start trading sex more in the area for fish. And it's a whole thing. And essentially what has happened in some areas is that HIV rates have reached as high as 41%, and it's created a public health concern. So I think a lot of people kind of think oh, marine, how does marine relate to me? And there's so many links that people don't realize actually affects them, even if they're not an ocean user. Like an increased HIV rate affects the entire populations, whether you go in the ocean or not. So it's really important to remember that. And also, just talking on the longevity thing that Marina spoke about earlier, it's also important to think about solving these issues and how you solve them. Like a couple of NGOs came in and tried to buy these boats for these women, but there was no long-term presence and no sustainability built around it. So these boats existed. The women were great for like, 6 months. The boats broke and now they're no longer in use and the problem still exists. So it's also important to think about like the solutions that we come up with and building sustainability around them, so that it comes from within the community that is living on that coastline or whatever, so that it's sustainable in the long term.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's just crazy. Like, it just so more and more evident that ocean health equals human health, well-being, everything. It's so interconnected, and those conversations need to be had in cohesion and collaboration. So yeah, thanks for that. It's good to see, actually, we've got some questions coming in from the audience already. So we're going to highlight this one from Sue in Ireland, who's asked us to mention any MPAs that are successful and what they aimed to protect and why they worked. And actually, this might be a good time to bring Max into the fold. Max, really glad you could join us. That must have been a mad dash from wherever you were giving that talk to your hotel. So like, genuinely, thanks for squeezing this in and making the time, and thanks for your energy and time for this one. So that seems like a good question to put to you. Examples of successful MPAs, what they aim to protect, and why they worked. And this might be a good time to talk about the amazing developments in Chile as well.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for being so late. I was making another presentation here with the government of Canary Islands. This is a great question, because of course we should be thinking about why we create marine protected areas. Are they working or not? Some of the examples, and I was just answering also on the chat. It is important to remember marine protected areas are not necessarily a new tool. We know now better. They've been used probably more, and we know about the 30% and many things. But if you look at the Polynesian, for example, culture, they've been using the rahuid and the tapu and many other measures that are basically marine protected areas to do the same that we've been trying to achieve today. There's great examples in French Polynesia, in the Austral Islands, for example, and other sites. Currently, I think on the new modern marine protected areas, probably one of the biggest cases is the Cabo Pulmo, which has been showing some numbers even of close to 500% of biomass been increasing after the area was protected. The area was protected by a community, fishing community, actually, and so it's extremely important, no? We have also the Papahānaumokuākea, which is an area that belongs to the United States in the Hawaii area. It's actually the biggest no-take marine protected area. We've seen also the current administration moving against it, let's say, or trying to undermine the marine protected area. But that area actually have been showing incredible news about the amount of biomass and the growing of, particularly on the stock of the tuna, which was actually the main issue when the area was trying to be protected, because of the industry that was taking the tuna, then it was against the marine protected area. Same case with Revillagigedo, 149,000 kilometers square of no-take marine protected area in Mexico, which was created also about, I think now it's 8 years ago, and already been showing incredible amount of biomass growing. Again, tuna in particular, that is coming out, the spillover effect that you would like to expect. Of course, tuna is one of the best examples because of the rate of growing, the amount of reproduction, eggs, etc., etc. No? So there are many of these examples that we should look into. But what is important, of course, is trying to have the baseline. So what do you have now? Where are you going? Why are you protecting it? What species, what ecosystem, what processes? So then expecting what are the final results of that. Plus, it's important also that you need to expect better results from better protection. And this is something that is extremely important. Higher protection, no take, highly protected areas will give you more, and probably in shorter term time too, of course, depending on the ecosystem, the previous threats, etc., and the species. But you would expect a better than recovery, for example, if you are protecting it from different angles. So no extraction will give you then much bigger results, of course, than an area that will still be, for example, fishing, even if the fishing, comes in different forms or impact. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it did wonderfully, and thank you for sharing that insight. And actually, just staying with the Chile conversation right now, I know that the reason it's been so celebrated, not only is it one of the largest MPAs now in total globally, but also it's been very much led by that community sort of conversation, right? And this has been a few decades in the making, and I know that you've been very active on the ground there, working with those communities to help bring this together. So yeah, it's a big celebration all round. But there's a really interesting question that we've been sent in by Dominique, and this is around sort of the government now, because that actually was signed off by the president, who then a couple of days later was replaced, right, by Chile's new president, President Cast, who comes in with a few different sort of political perspectives. In terms of what I was reading, is this could be potentially the most right-wing party that Chile has seen since Pinochet. What does that mean? What does that mean for the longevity of the MPA that we've seen in place?
It's a great question, and particularly now, also one of the madness. I had a lot of calls and messages now, because the current administration just retired all the decrees that were still in the controller. So once you have the decree signed by the president and the ministers, and then it goes into the controller, which have to review. It's a kind of like independent part of the state of the government, the administration. Well, it goes beyond the administration that reviews the whole process, if it's been done well, legally, etc. Under the forms. They have retired currently. They took out of the controller about 50 decrees. One of them, of course, the latest, which is because the president, Gabriel Boric, actually signed, it was his last administrative act in office. So last thing he signed was this decree, which include two new marine protected areas, which are basically the expansion of these two existing marine protected areas in Juan Fernández and Desventuradas, which now account for almost 1 million kilometers square of no-take marine protected area, which will be about the second or third, depending on how you account, biggest marine protected area, no-take marine protected area. So great news that now a little bit overcast by this situation. However, this is kind of a normal practice of the administration to kind of review the last acts of the previous government. So it gives you a little bit of room to see if there's something that has been doing in the last minute in a wrongly, let's say. So it was taken on the same group. We're expecting the government will return that decree as it was after a short review. We, of course, were worried. We were trying to monitor the situation, but we will see what is happening. Now, the news was extremely impressively big in Chile. I think it's probably one of the biggest good news in Chile that we have had in a while, and particularly in terms of environment. So I'm expecting that they will also read this. Of course, they come in with very different ideas. Mining is one of their main interests. But what you said also is key. There's a very active community behind. And behind that active community, there's a massive movement, public movement in Chile, citizen movement that is supporting this situation and is supporting this community. This community really was the one who called us to finalize this protection and expand it, which of course wasn't fully protected before because of the interest of fishing industry and semi-industrial fishing. So we got a good news just a week ago. Now we're a little bit, shaking, but I think I'm really expecting that this is not going to take longer to be put back into the office.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Max. Thanks for that insight. Marina, I'm very aware that we're going to be losing you in around 8 minutes' time, and I want to make sure that we extract as much insight from you.
Well, I was just going to add some numbers to what Max was saying, just globally in terms of like the abandonment of conservation projects. So there's a great paper by that's led by Rachel Golden Kroner, which says that at least 3,749 government-led conservation projects have been downgraded, degazetted, or downsized across 73 countries. So I think this kind of political turmoil with the government like declaring something and then potentially things not being very, I guess, stable is something that we're going to encounter more and more as we seem to have governments which are can't say crazy, but maybe I can say crazy. But I think it's something that again, it's this idea about community participation, and like Max was saying, like how important this is for Chile. So if this is something that the community is like the population supports, and the importance of these areas have been explained, and it's compatible with what the locals need, then there's going to be a much greater push to actually maintain these areas than not. So I just thought I'd put these numbers out there.
No, it's really fascinating, and thanks for that, because it actually leads into this question about the 30 by 30 target and this sort of bold ambition that we're all chasing down globally. But do we, with that in mind, are we running a risk of prioritizing quantity over the quality of these MPAs?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think like conservationists and resource managers and fisheries experts have been pushing that point for quite a long time, that we don't need just more area. We need we need to protect the right places, the right species, the species that are endangered in the right way. Right? It's not about area. We have to move beyond that, and we've got to move beyond that pretty quickly if we're going to have a positive impact in the ocean.
No, absolutely. Francesca, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Sorry. Yeah. So obviously I work in Mozambique, so my experience is Western Indian Ocean based, but I can speak for what we're experiencing in Mozambique right now. The plus of the 30-30 push is that there's more political will. So we're seeing more talk in government. We're being invited to more like action conferences, natural resource mapping. The chat on the ground is more positive, and we're definitely moving into a positive direction. The cons, or not cons, but like slight hiccups in the road, shall we say, that will come up and are currently becoming a conversation, is the designations and what they actually allow. So in Mozambique and many other countries, there are some marine protected area designations that actually allow extractive activities like oil, mining, all of that kind of stuff. So we are actually sat with the problem where the same departments that we were in a conversation with the week before last in the capital city, where we sat with them and the directors recommitted to community-led conservation and marine protected areas, and it was all really good, positive chat, moving in the right direction. That was on the Monday to Friday on 1 week, and literally the Monday after that Friday finished, we were in a stakeholder consultation with a Chinese company that's contracted a consultant to do a public stakeholder consultation on seismic testing in order for extractive activities right next to the current national park, Bazaruti Archipelago, which is Mozambique's biggest and probably most famous national park, and is managed by Africa, co-managed by Africa Parks. And that's the same. So Mozambique government bids for these contracts. So that's the same departments that have just sat and said, oh yeah, we're really like passionate about conservation and this is a really great thing. And then we have extractive activities as well. So it's definitely, when we talk about barriers, ultimately the money and the priorities of the political party, but also the individual government entities, because we had it was stakeholder consultation, so we brought different representatives from all of our community areas, and we had local community members standing up and saying, why is the profits of one company being prioritized over the livelihoods of thousands of people? We're in a really important humpback whale migratory corridor. Like, this is going to screw up all of the wildlife. This is going to screw up so many different things. And now we're coordinating efforts to pull together all of the stakeholders and basically flood the inboxes with objection letters. But it's confusing and frustrating because the reason that the government is pushing with and agreeing in these conversations around conservation is because of 3030. So it's amazing. We actually have government support and the legislation is being refined and there's action steps being put in place that are tangible and actually mean something. But then at the same time, you've got the extractive activities still being allowed and the money still being wanted from those companies. So it's definitely nuanced and it's very country specific. So it's going to vary country to country hugely. So obviously Chile's had this amazing commitment and various different countries are, leaders on this front. But for us, where we are, it's conflicting and it's challenging, shall we say?
Yeah.
Rob, maybe I can.
Yeah, I'd love to come to you, Max. I'm just so aware that we are going to lose. Morena in 2 minutes because she's got to dart off for other commitments. But just a final word from you then, Morena, before you do have to go. Any thoughts on what Francesca's just said, or anything you want to leave us with before you dart off?
Well, I guess maybe I think the most important thing to be thinking about, right? So we're not trying to we don't want to necessarily just expand area, right? We want to create effective marine protected areas that are that have multiple benefits, right? And when we're thinking about designing these, and when we're thinking about basically thinking about new ones or even making the old existing ones more effective, we should be thinking about activities that will we should be thinking about things that will benefit the local people. We should be thinking about designing initiatives that are compatible with the local needs. And we should be thinking about making sure that there is extension support. So whether that's NGOs or government extension support that will actually provide the local stakeholders with the whatever they need to actually engage. So that might be money, that might be just ability to fill in forms or whatever it is. And we also need these government policies that are supporting the initiative, right? So, and I think if we have those, I think we can create these initiatives that will likely spread further and that will be implemented for longer. So hopefully that's what we're doing. And I've got all my fingers all crossed for you, Max, and I hope that the MPA in Chile stays in place.
Will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you genuinely for your time. Yeah, good to have your insights there. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Max, back to you. I hope that you held on to that kernel of a thought that you had there, because we're going to explore that a bit more now.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important question to make for sure. And, I think for the first part of it, it's important to remember that the 30% is at least 30%, no? I've seen a lot of even governments that say like, okay, we need to get to the 30%, and that's it, no? And then there's a lot of worry from civil society, from other NGOs too, on like, oh gosh, so then when we get there, we're done.
Mm.
And I think it's important to remember, like the case of Chile, we are now with this protection, we are in 54%. It's the 10th biggest economic exclusive zone. We need more in the coastal areas, for sure. But there is more interest. There is more, from the community side, from NGO, from local government. Just in the last couple of weeks, actually, I've been getting calls from local governments to support them on more marine protected areas. They're smaller. They might not do much in terms of the percentage, but we haven't been finished, no? And I love when Sylvia said, like, 30%. That's a good start. No, we need to go beyond that for sure. We are already talking about 50 to 50%. So that's one element first. The other element too, at this point, and again also with words of Sylvia, there's almost no place to go wrong about protecting at this point. And we tend to think about these areas that are extremely now complex because of the interest that existing now, no? But what happened with the future? Like, I've been in Mozambique. What an amazing place. I mean, it probably, if you work on marine conservation, I mean, we should all be working in Mozambique. It has some of the most incredible ecosystem diversity, some of the best coral reefs I've ever seen in my life in Bamisi, which are very, very complex areas, of course, socially, economically, politically, war-wise, etc. But we need to protect them. And their communities, some of the poorest communities I've ever seen, still protecting some of these areas, no? I would say it is important to remember then that we need to think about the future of this area. So you can be spending, and we should be spending 20 years on protecting very small area with very complex situation, but we might be forgetting about these other areas that might be opportunistically are easier, but might be in 10 more years, we're gonna be like, oh my God, we should protect it when we could. And now they're under the threat of deep sea mining, of oil and gas, or whatever it is. We didn't do it because we thought that this area was more important. I think we need to take everything as much as possible on that, and not this fight in between us of like, is that more important than this and than that? Let's try to protect as much as we can everywhere. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Oh, great sentiments. It sounds like I need to get myself to Mozambique. I feel very left out right now. Francesca, anything you wanted to sort of chime in on what Max has just enlightened us with?
No, I don't think so. I think he summed it up pretty well. Like, yeah, we need alignment and we need strategic marine protected areas. We, instead of just declaring massive parts and that don't have presence or any kind of enforcement or even communication to the communities that live there, for example, it's so important to have that alliance across from top down, but also from bottom up, and have that collective action across the whole process. And some accountability as well, which I know one of the questions was around accountability and how we really hold people accountable. And the answer is that governments are governments, so that they can make their own rules at the end of the day. So it's incredibly difficult to do that. But I mean, scientifically, reviews of MPA effectiveness and things like that are published on different marine protected areas, and that goes into scientific literature. And I think magazines like Oceanographic are so important in communicating that science to the wider public, because cool, it got published in a paper, but what does that really mean for like your average person who wants to understand how effective a marine protected area is, if it's behind a paywall of a journal, or it's just not accessible in a language that is accessible for general public. So communicating what's happening on the ground is becoming more important more than ever. And speaking with communities, NGOs that are based in those areas to understand what the real problems are, what the real barriers are, And then also within the NGO network, knowledge sharing. Like, knowledge sharing cannot be understated. A lot, as Max said right at the beginning, MPAs are not a new concept. This isn't brand new. This is super, super old. And so there's so many lessons to be learned and shared, and not reinventing the wheel and collaborating is really so important. And on the competition kind of element, that exists in the NGO sector from underfunding and NGOs competing for similar pots of money. It also exists in terms of MPA establishment, which areas of MPAs we're creating. We need to work together more collaboratively and collectively to be able to reach the conservation goals that we need for humans to be able to continue existing on this planet the way we want to.
Yeah. Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, both. I'm just super conscious of your time. I'm probably, Max, you got to shoot off to another dignitary award, I'm no doubt. And Francesca, you probably got to start work on your next paper. So I'm going to leave you to your respective evenings. And thank you again for your time and energy and your insight into this conversation. I really appreciate that. And thank you also to everyone watching, wherever you may be, for your questions and your involvement in this conversation too. Just to remind you, you can join us each week where we'll be diving into a different headline story from across the Oceanographic newsroom. And we'll also be bringing live ocean talks each month to a various location around the UK. So just check out the Oceanographic website for details on that. But there's nothing else for me to say, but thank you again for all your time and your questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.